Hello, this is Watch All About with another watch review, and in this review we're looking at the Seiko Sumo, the blue version, also known as the Blumo, and that is the SBD C033. So the 033 is actually the second version, the 003 was the initial version. So, as you can see, this is the box. Nothing really too exciting about the packaging, I'll be completely honest. Here we go, open that bad boy up. We've got some paperwork in here as well. A little guarantee, which is blank. It's good. And then some instructions in Japanese and English. So here's our case. Again, nothing really too exciting. It's just a bit of cardboard, really. And it feels a little bit flimsy. Open it up and bam, there we go. So now we're talking. Let's just take this off the cushion, put it to one side. So what else do we get in here? So I've got all the spare links in there, and then just a few little labels, etc. that would have been stuck on the watch itself. Okay, so here it is in all its glory. Now this is a watch I've actually had for a little while, so it's taken me a good few months to get around to this review. Obviously, as I personally own it, usually it gets put to the bottom of the pile rather than and other watch manufacturers who have like sent me watches and asked for me to review them get put first. So I'm happy to finally get around to sharing my thoughts with it. So let's discuss some of the specs. So as I mentioned before, this is the second generation. So the primary difference really is we have this Pro Specs logo just above automatic on the dial. And on the first version, it just had the word Scuba printed. And the Pro Specs is basically a collection of watches that Seiko manufacture. Pro Specs stands for Professional Specification, so it's obviously their professional diving range. Okay, so size. So I've got a 7¼ inch wrist approximately for reference. So we have 44.5mm diameter, so we have got a fairly big size to the dial. A height of 13.5mm. A lug-to-lug length of 52.5mm. So we are pretty chunky, pretty big. Certainly gives you a lot of wrist presence, but it is very, very comfortable. So we'll continue on that in a little while. Weight, I've had about 3 links removed, and I'm on 172 grams. So it is pretty weighty. Certainly feels good quality on the wrist and when you're handling it. Water resistance, 200 meters or 20 atmospheres. So obviously that's certainly enough to go proper diving if you want to. Obviously it is professional specification, so you'd expect that. Lug width, 20mm. So this is one of the key issues actually that people have, and that people think that 20mm is probably a little bit too thin. Doesn't quite match the watch head. Personally, I mean, I obviously also had that concern when I first bought the watch, but I can completely say that it really hasn't been that big of an issue for me whatsoever. I haven't even noticed it visually. I don't think it looks too jarring or anything, and in fact the thinner bracelet aids comfort. It makes it feel really comfortable to wear. So that's not really an issue that I have found at all. So hopefully that will help a few of you make a decision on this. You do get a 2-year international warranty with it as well. However, most of these are available on the grey market, so it is a bit dubious as to whether that warranty will actually stand. So the movement is that the Seiko 6R15, and a few specs include 50 hours power reserve, hand winding, automatic winding, hacking second hand as well, 23 joules, and it's a low beat, so it's 21.6 thousand beats per hour, so that's 6 ticks a second. This one is coming in at around about plus 10.5 seconds a day, so yes, a little bit higher than I'd expect, but usually from an automatic mechanical, you know, I'm usually pretty happy with around about the 10-second mark, so I can't really complain too much about that. Okay, 2 other interesting specs, definitely worth mentioning, is the loom is absolutely sensational. It's Seiko's Lumi Bright loom, and I mean, this is the benchmark that all other watch manufacturers go for, to be honest. The Seiko loom is like no other. In fact, you could probably, look at that. Even in complete daylight, you can see it glowing brightly. It is that amazing. Really, you know, you just can't help but stop and just look at it and think how amazingly strong it is when you're walking around. The second one, and this following specification is probably the key issue that many people have, doesn't have a sapphire crystal. It has a hard Lex crystal. So hard Lex is hardened mineral. So it is harder than a mineral crystal, not as scratch resistant as sapphire though. And unfortunately, this watch has got a couple of very, very teeny tiny scratches on it. So that is going to be one of the key issues. Obviously, these are available, you know, it's difficult to get your hands on one. Usually they're about £350 upwards. So, you know, a watch costing that much, you really, really would expect a sapphire crystal, wouldn't you? However, Seiko don't like to do that too often, which is a pain in the bum. They like to use their own in-house hard Lex crystal. So I have borne the brunt of the issue. Let's see. I mean, I'll get these macro lens on later, but let's see if you can actually see a scratch at all. Okay, so in the reflection, you can sort of see two teeny tiny scratches just here. See if I can clean up the crystal a little bit more. So you can see just here. There you go. Two very teeny tiny scratches and one here as well. So obviously it is a disappointment. However, the interesting thing is that usually I'll be like, damn it, that really, really spoils the entire watch for me. Because they're so minor, I suppose that's obviously a key issue. I really haven't found myself falling out of love with the watch. So let's go through the rest of it and see why it's such a splendid watch. Obviously, it has a reputation that precedes it, the Seiko Sumo. So let's have a look and understand why that is the case. So start off with the dial, really. Obviously, it's professional specification diver. Simplicity is best. Legibility. And I think legibility is perfectly suitable. I do like the slightly unusual hand designs, and I like the little loomed section on the second hand as well, a little bit different. Hour markers are all applied, and the hour markers and the hands have a polished base to them, so it reflects the light well, really eye-catching as well. As you can see, when it hits the light just right, you get a nice little reflection going on. So for a straightforward, simple design, I think the hands offer that little bit of difference to it, and I think it's still really nice to look at despite its simplicity. The date window just simply cut out of the dial with a white border around it. Nothing too crazy, but again, simplicity and easy to read. Moving on to the case. Oh yeah, it's got a blue base as well, which matches the rest of the blue themed section really nicely, and this rehaut as well. I like the rehaut actually. It's a nice flow from the low dial up to the angled inside of the bezel insert, so that's really, really smart. I personally prefer the blue to the black. I think it's a little bit different, and black watches, they're very, 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 very well, they're everywhere, aren't they? So I like to have the occasional difference in colour. The case then. So really, this is where the Seiko Sumo, as well as the loom, this is where the Sumo comes into its own. And I'm sure if you've done a little bit of research, you'll have read that many people love the craftsmanship and design of the case, and I do as well. It's beautiful, freely flowing lines, almost liquid-like. And every single angle you look at it, it's a work of art. So let's start from the top. I mean, the bezel insert. So interestingly, the case actually contains the bezel insert on the sides. Now, it obviously means you can't adjust the bezel. Well, it's very difficult to adjust the bezel from the sides. However, in reality, whenever you do adjust the bezel, I'm sure like me, you'll actually adjust it like that from the top and the bottom. So in reality, it doesn't really affect your usage of the bezel. The bezel mechanism, butterly smooth. It's beautiful, lines up perfectly. Insert is flawless as well, and obviously the loomed pip at 12 has that epic loom, and the pip is really neat as well. So I do like the really fat, chunky text used on the bezel. Again, legibility, and it's just really, really nice and bold. I like it. So that's a nice little unusual spot. And then the bezel, if we hold it this way, you'll notice it flowers outwards as well. So the top is thicker than the bottom, so that's really good for grip. Nice, subtle grip as well. So, you know, we don't have massively thick teeth, but just these gentle lines which are really nice and easy to grip. So starting off on this one side, you notice we have this brushed central channel, and then that's flanked by a polished top and bottom. As you can see there, really nice shapely side profile as well. And I really like this end, if I can get a decent shot, this end of the lug. You know, how many sections we've got to this? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, and 6 almost. But if you see just the accuracy of how all these angles come together, and the varying finishes as well, obviously brushed and polished coming up against each other, absolutely spotless. And we have a drilled through lug as well, which again, the hole is pretty perfect. On this side we have the same, except we have the crown, and the crown really nice and grippy. I like how it's offset at 4 as well, again a little bit different. However, that goes with Seiko's theme, doesn't it, with the offset crown. And then the S, which is really, really deeply engraved on the end of the crown. So just moving on to the underside, as you can see, we have a very tucked in sides, fully polished bottom as well. Then if we have a look at the case back, we have the wave that is apparent on a number of Seiko watches, and just these details relatively deeply engraved on this brushed base as well. So moving on to the bracelet. Now many people seem to be, they don't seem to be too impressed with the quality of the bracelet. One thing definitely worth noting is how it uses the pin and collar system. So I do have a video on how to resize a bracelet with the pin and collar system. So if you are intrigued or interested or want to know how to do it, then please check out my video. I haven't found it to be too bad quality. You know, loads of people have really poo-pooed it quite harshly. I mean, I agree that the polished, we have 3 links, and the center link has polished channels either side. I think they're probably a little bit unnecessary. It's a nice little touch visually. However, it's not done to the same quality as the case is. So it doesn't match up quite to the level of the case. I suppose that's what many people are probably trying to explain, but they're poo-pooing it a bit too much, I think, because it still is a very thick, very chunky, and wonderfully comfortable bracelet at the end of the day. Onto the buckle then. So we have a Seiko deeply engraved on the top flap, 2 a double locking clasp, so we have these then 2 buttons either side to release the clasp. And we also have a diver's extension here, and we have 4 holes for micro adjustment, which you know, allows you to get a perfect fit. So I have been able to do that. Okay, so let's get the macro lens out then and have a look at it in much closer detail. So let's start with the dial. Actually, I'm just going to change the time quickly, because 1:05 is a little bit of a difficult time to have a look at the hands. Okay, so whilst I've got the crown out, let's have a look at the crown thread. Really nice, decent thread, really easy to use the crown. And you can see there, thick S. So I'll just pop that back in. Okay, so our print work, very nice and neat, as you can imagine. Even this microscopic text at the bottom here, and you can see the quality of our hour markers with our polished edges as well. I like how the dial base has a very gentle texture to it as well. So that does introduce a very tiny amount of texture to the viewing experience. Looking at the hands, polished as well. And there we have our flawless construction really, and our plentiful loom as well. Moving on to our date window there. Nothing too exciting to mention about that. Let's see if I can get a shot of the scratches. Yeah, so you can see there, tiny scratch there. See if I can get, here we go, tiny scratch there as well. So to the naked eye, you can't really see it, but it is there. So moving on to the bezel insert. Here's our loom pip, very nicely sunken into the insert. Again, all this print work pretty fine, nothing to complain about. So onto the case itself. Here's the grip of the bezel, and we can see over here, you can see it contains the bezel on this side as well. Very nice and neatly done. Have this little tuck in here where the bracelet meets the case, and then our top, and here we have this magnificent join. Just see the angles on that and how perfectly manufactured it is. Really nothing to complain about in the slightest. If I just give this side a quick wipe, we can see the central channel as well. So here we have our brushed. It's a bit difficult to get a decent shot on. There we go. So it does pick up a little bit of scratches, as you can imagine, just because it's a polished case. And there's our hole for our jeweled through lugs. So on this side, we've already had a look at our crown. So let's continue and move on to the case back itself. So our central motif there, and some detailing, nice and deeply engraved. There's a Prospex logo and a serial number there. So moving on to the bracelet. Here's one of our links, and you can see our polished edge to the central link. We have polished sides as well, so that's nice to look at when you're wearing it. Gives you a nice splash of reflection. And then moving on to the buckle itself, here's our top flap. As you can see, it's got a few death diver marks on, so it's held up pretty well, because it is I did get this second hand, so it has been passed around. And then if we flap that open, we'll have our button on the side there, and we have polished, if I can get a shot, polished corners as well. Okay, so there we have it. So I mean, I'm pretty picky when it comes to spending money, and I did spend about, I think it was just over 300 quid I got this for, and it was last year. Now, I think the key thing that works in the Seiko Sumo's favour is the fact that despite it having a hard Lex Crystal, and despite it having a couple of microscopic scratches, despite the width of the bracelet, I still haven't had any urges or inclinations at all to sell it. In fact, I really love it. It's one of those kind of watches that you think to yourself, there's just no need to sell it, because it's that nice in the flesh. And yes, it does have some minor niggles, pretty obvious niggles, but I think if you are on the fence about one, I would just say just go for it, and chances are 99% of the time you won't regret it. It's such a lovely watch. Design wise, it's so simple, bold, in your face as well, and just the overall quality of the case is magnificent, and the finishing of the dial as well, and the loom is just outstanding. Really for me, the loom is one of the key things. It just gives you so much pleasure when you're wearing it, and even in the daylight you can see it glowing brightly. It's incredible. That really does increase the viewing pleasure of the watch. So this was the Seiko Sumo review at long last. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Please subscribe or like or comment, and thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.